reports about police vehicles outside his home and whether or not he's being stalked now by the police. Mr. Maharaj, good to have you on the program.
Pleasure to be here. Morning.
We've heard from the present Attorney General, Ram Logan, saying that this ACIB that is under his watch, he's not comfortable with it. He wants it removed because it shouldn't be under his portfolio, and that it was introduced in your time as Attorney General. Give us a context as to why the ACIB is under the purview of the Attorney General's office.
Well, I took the position as an Attorney General that the function of an Attorney General is to guard the public interest and to be as a check on any misuse or abuse of power by the Cabinet or by the Prime Minister. During the UNC administration, there were serious allegations of corruption. And based on consultation I had with the Commissioner of Police, the then Commissioner of Police, the Minister of National Security, it was decided that an anti-corruption unit of the police service be established. And in the discussion with the police service, they wanted assistance. They wanted a forensic person, they wanted a lawyer, and therefore this unit was set up, and it was agreed by the police that this unit be established at the office of the Attorney General because there was no other space, and the police wanted it to be under the purview of the Attorney General because the Attorney General had to provide the resources for lawyers and for forensic persons. And it was in that context it was put under the office of the Attorney General. But I think there is a misunderstanding by ministers of this government and by the government as a whole as to what is the function of a minister. If you look at the Constitution under Section 77 or one of those sections, you would see that every government department has to be under a minister. That is why the President allots ministry on the advice of the Prime Minister. The minister under the Constitution is accountable to the people through the Parliament for the functioning of that government department. So whether it is under the AG Ministry or under the Ministry of National Security, you must have a minister. Now the minister under the Constitution is not supposed to direct a police officer who to arrest and whose home to search. A minister is supposed to be responsible for the administration of the department through the permanent secretary. And the permanent secretary is responsible for supervising that ministry.
So just for the purposes of clarity, because the Attorney General, Ram Logan, the current Attorney General, is stating that he wants it removed from his portfolio, which implies that if it's something that I can't have any say in, why should I be held responsible for it?
Well, I think that is the wrong. His say, and as Attorney General, is not to interfere in police investigation. His say is not to tell them who to arrest and who not to arrest.
Is it about saying who to arrest or at least be consulted? I think it's important in the broader understanding of government, Mr. Maharaj.
Well, he does it through the permanent secretary. His permanent secretary is a public officer, and the permanent secretary and the Solicitor General and the Director of Public Prosecution will consult and communicate with the police. But under our Constitution, they are insulated from political interference. And if it is that a minister of this government wants to have a police unit under his ministry because he wants to control the police, that is against the Constitution, and the minister later on can be prosecuted for misconduct in public office.
So it really doesn't matter under which ministerial portfolio the ACIB is under. It is still supposed to function the same way.
It must function under the Constitution under a minister of government. That is the whole basis of our Constitution is responsible government, where the government, through the minister, accounts to the Parliament. But I ask the question aloud. Why is it after a whole year the Attorney General did not take steps to go to the Cabinet to remove that from under his ministry? This has been functioning under the AG Ministry for over a year. Further, when I was no longer Attorney General, it functioned under the present Prime Minister when she was Attorney General. It functioned under Glenda Morin. It functioned under John Jeremy. The PNM restructured it. But you have to understand that it has been found by the governments of Britain the United States and Canada, with whom I consulted at the time as the Attorney General, that for you to attack organized crime and to be effective in the fight against corruption, you need a special unit of the police service, service with appropriate personnel, and service with adequate forensic help and lawyers. At the time, Mr. Carl Hudson Phillips was in effect the advisor to this unit. As Attorney General, I never had a meeting with the police officers. I never met with them. The Permanent Secretary, the Solicitor General, and the DPP met with them. But if anything went wrong with that unit, I would get a report through the Permanent Secretary, through the DPP, if he's prepared to give a report, and through the Solicitor General, and I will go to Parliament.
But you would also get the political licks, Mr. Maharaj, because it speaks to a broader issue, which I just want to touch on briefly. Does it mean that really in our present structure of governance in Trinidad and Tobago, that the people who really run government are the permanent secretaries?
The people who run government is the Permanent Secretary, but the minister is supposed to micromanage his ministry, get information, decide what policy to implement. When you go at election time, they vote for the minister, they vote for persons to run a government.
But if the Permanent Secretary is at odds with his or her minister,
then you take steps to have the Permanent Secretary disciplined, removed. The Prime Minister has, I worked with a Permanent Secretaries for about 5 or 6 years. I work with the same police service. I work with a lot of public officials, and they do not try to obstruct a government.
They don't?
No.
You talk to certain ministers, they say something entirely different,
No. Ministers have to understand that this is not a job just to go to cocktail parties, eat a lot of food, put on a lot of weight, right? This is a job in which you have to spend time, you have to study your ministry, you have to work at it, you have to micromanage it, you have to learn to work with people.
So when something like what occurred on Thursday, and clearly this would have been the trigger for what Anand Ram Logan is saying, get this thing away from me. When something like that occurs, what should an Attorney General, a responsible minister, do when something like that transpires?
Well, that Attorney General should have been working with this unit through the Permanent Secretary, through the DPP, through the Solicitor General, since he became a minister. He should have had an idea, not as to who they investigated, but she should have had an idea as to what kind of guidelines they operate on, and if they operate in accordance with the rule of law. If I were the Attorney General and that incident had occurred, I would have got a report within 24 hours, and I would have taken a decision as an Attorney General whether that was lawful or not. I would have called in the SG, who is the Solicitor General. I would have tried to have a meeting with the DPP, and if it was unlawful, I would have come out and said it was unlawful and what the government is going to do. Because although the police function with police work, the government, through the Attorney General, function in accordance with law and is responsible for law. And if it is that it is unlawful, then obviously they should be called in. They should be called in, and they should be told that it is lawful. The Newsday and individuals shouldn't have to go through a whole process in the courts if the government knows that it is lawful. But the Attorney General, if I may say with the greatest respect, cannot take the attitude that I don't want it, I don't want to interfere. If it is that he did not want that portfolio, he should have told the Prime Minister. He should have told the Prime Minister before. Not now, but if it is the portfolio, that department is under his portfolio, he have a responsibility to the people of this country to have investigated what went on, to come out and tell the country the facts and say if it is unlawful. Now, I have here a copy of the 2 warrants.
Yes.
What happened in this case? What happened in this case is that under Section 35(2) of the Integrity of Public Life Act, this Section 35(2) is not directed against Bagu. This 35(2) section is directed against any member of the Commission or any person in the service of the Commission who discloses information or evidence which is recorded by the Commission. That is the offense. This warrant, on the face of it, went in to look for evidence to find out the source of the information. So under the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago, the freedom of the press is a guaranteed right. As part of that right of the freedom of the press is the protection of the source of the journalist's information.
Yes.
So the police, in my view, could not have gone into the Newsday lawfully to look for information when they could have got that information in accordance with due process of law.
So, and that begs the obvious question, Mr. Maraj, which Raul Panton was asking as well on this program yesterday as a senior journalist. How come the ACIB or whatever agency is going at the possible collector of the information and not going to the provider of the information basically from the Integrity Commission?
But you see, if I were Attorney General and that unit was functioning under my ministry, I would have ensured that when I became Attorney General, I would have looked at it and see under what guidelines they operate. Do they consult lawyers in a matter like this? Do they consult the Director of Public Prosecutions? Because the Director of Public Prosecution is an important functionary in the criminal process. And the purpose of having a DPP insulated is that he would be able to bring an independent mind, not a political mind, an independent mind to what is happening, because on a lot of occasions the police become very emotional. And we have to understand the government cannot distance itself from this operation. Under the Constitution, you have a political arm of the government, but you have the public service and the police service. If the government sets the bad example, if the government creates a state of emergency, lock up people, disregard the DPP, abuse search warrants, then what do you expect the police to do? And therefore, the question here is, what guidelines, if any, the Attorney General had for the operation of that unit which fell under his ministry? After he found out what has happened here, what steps did he take to protect the public interest? Did he look at the warrant? Did he look at the Constitution? He knows that freedom of the press is a guaranteed right under the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago. He also knows, because he has appeared in some of these cases, he also knows that if it is a fundamental right, no police could go and look for information to get the source of the information when they could have applied to the courts. Where you have a fundamental right as a media, and if Mr. Bago, the Newsday, refuses to give that information, you have to go to the courts. You cannot use the coercive machinery of the state under Section 35 of the Integrity of Public Life Act, which is directed against a member of the Commission or an employee of the Commission, to find an indirect way of getting the source of the information.
So, Mr. Maraj, I'm just trying to understand the trail of responsibility in this. Doesn't the Commissioner of Police come into this in any way? Because, again, questions are being asked of the Police Commissioner. He was given a 24-hour deadline by the leader of the COP, by the leader of the PNM to respond, to give an explanation. How does it function in law, in our present structure?
You know, what I'm surprised about is that an Attorney General, under the laws, the common law and the Constitution, has powers to get this if the information is refused. The Attorney General, as the guardian of the public interest, has an exception to the rule. He can go to the court to get an order. He acts in the public interest. The law reports have a lot of these cases. You think that...
So what would you have done if you were AG? Right, you Thursday come and you suddenly see on Thursday afternoon, you hear all of this going on, that they went into Newsday and they take Andre Bagus, went to his home, and so what would you have done?
I'll tell you what I would have done.
Yeah.
I would have contacted my permanent secretary, my Solicitor General, and I would have got a meeting with the Minister of National Security, his ministry, and we would have had everybody together, the Commissioner of Police, the Solicitor General, everybody, immediately, day, morning or night. And I would have indicated that I need to report to Parliament. I need to report to the population on this matter. I want a report in 24 hours. I would have looked at the report. I would have got the advice from DPP, SG, etc. I would have looked at it myself, and I would have gone to the nation and said exactly what is the view, whether this is lawful or not. If the Commissioner of Police did not give me the report, I would have gone to the courts in an application to command him to give me a report. As an Attorney General, I have that power under the Constitution to protect the public interest. But I would not have said, I do not want it under my ministry. What the government is doing, the government has only embarked upon a public relations exercise without dealing with the issue in this case. The issue in this case is that we have had the police searching 2 media houses, TV6 and Newsday. Now, the government was not as aggressive against the police with the TV6 search, but they have been very aggressive with the public relations. But this does not only need aggression with public relations. It needs for the population to know, and for no police officer to search another media house or harass journalists in this way.
Is this a dereliction of duty by the present Attorney General?
Well, I wouldn't put it in that way, but I think the Attorney General should advise himself as to what is his role in this matter. An Attorney General doesn't have the power to say, I do not want a portfolio, take it away from me. That is a function of the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister was Attorney General after I was removed from that office, and she functioned in that ministry. She was the minister responsible. She, as Prime Minister, knew about it. As leader of the opposition, she knew about it. She, as Prime Minister, now knew when she was appointing ministers. She had to put that portfolio under the present Attorney General. So how it is they could come now as if they didn't know about this? And the present Prime Minister and the Attorney General knew the kind of work that unit did whilst I was Attorney General. That unit was commended by the British, the Canadians, and Janet Reno, who came to Trinidad and Tobago as an innovative step in the fight against organized crime. So I think it is wrong for the government to give the impression that it is because it is under the AG ministry, things have gone wrong. When the ministers themselves have to do the job, the population did not vote for the Commissioner of Police, The population voted for the government to run the country.
So let's just say, for example, that Anand Ramlogan has his wish and it is moved to, let's say, Ministry of National Security. Does anything change fundamentally in law and the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago?
No, the Minister of National Security will have to do the job he was supposed to do.
And which is basically to liaise and consult and oversee.
And to oversee, but I would have thought, and the reason, the rationale at the time for having it under the AG ministry was the AG was responsible for law. And therefore, you had a lot of situations where you would have them perhaps not complying with the law. And therefore, you had to have guidelines which they have to operate. For example, that unit could not have operated outside guidelines if the Attorney General, at the commencement of his ministry, had found out under what guidelines they operate. Call in the DPP, call in the Solicitor General, and have guidelines in law for them to operate. So if they operated outside of those guidelines, one of the guidelines could have been that if you are going with an important search that impacts on fundamental rights and impact on the freedom of the media, you have to consult with the DPP. You have to consult with the Solicitor General. The Solicitor General in the Ministry of the Attorney General is an independent public officer. The DPP is an independent person under the Constitution. So an Attorney General has the benefit of having persons insulated from the political directorate. And an Attorney General has a duty not to be subservient and sycophantic to a Prime Minister. The whole purpose of an Attorney General is to tell the Prime Minister if the Prime Minister is going wrong. If you look at history, Carl Hudson Phillips had to do that.
And you fell foul of your own Prime Minister 10 years ago, didn't you?
I had a duty to the public to do that. When you become an Attorney General, you are not concerned merely by occupying office and being a minister and pander to a Prime Minister just to be an Attorney General. You have a duty to the public.
Of course, depending on who you speak to, there will be, and this takes us back into the political realm of 10, 11 years ago, that you were the one, because of your own Napoleonic intentions of grandiose dreams of great leadership, that you were intent on destroying your own government for the sake of your political ambitions.
Well, you will have those who would have said that, but the facts show that what I did in the fight against corruption, the facts show that at all times I put country first.
And if
it is that as an Attorney General, a government is corrupt or there are serious allegations of corruption and they're not being investigated, an Attorney General have a duty to tell the Prime Minister about that. And if it means that the Prime Minister does not want to act, he has a duty to protect the public interest. I want to tell you something here now.
Yeah.
Do you know that when I went to be interviewed to be a candidate for Tabaquit for the last general elections, do you know the question that the present Prime Minister asked me? I want to tell you what was the question the present Prime Minister asked me. She said, Ramesh, if we formed a government of Trinidad and Tobago, and there were allegations of corruption against the government, and you are the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago under my government, would you behave the same way as you behaved under the UNC administration? I told her I would even behave stronger, because no government is supposed to be corrupt. An Attorney General is supposed to protect the public interest. And when I look and I see what is happening now, I see that what this government really needed, it needed strong individuals who would be able to understand the Constitution.
And you say this without fear of contradiction from the Prime Minister himself?
Without fear of contradiction. As a matter of fact, it was said in the presence of the entire panel. And there was an officer of that panel who came to me a few days ago and told me that I was correct when I gave that answer.
When we look at it in the context of the situation now involving the media, you mentioned the issue with the storming of TV6, which the police maintained was perfectly normal. There was 18 officers. They had a job to do in December of last year. The police also maintained they had a job to do in relation to the Newsday matter. If we could you could take us back to your time again as Attorney General, when we actually had members of the media marching against your administration, Mr. Murad, because of the green paper and the feeling that this was an attempt by your administration of which you were a part, to somehow muzzle the media. How do you place that in context with what we're experiencing now?
Well, in all governments you will have criticism by the media, and there is a level. So, for example, if you intend to introduce a measure and the media is marching against you, there's nothing wrong. The media is criticizing you. That's a very healthy sign. Green paper was published. That was prepared by a gentleman called Mr. Jeffrey Robertson, who is one of the leading persons on freedom of the media. And that, if you look at it now, without emotions,
yes,
you would see that some of the things that we are having now, if we had agreed to that, you would have had more protection for freedom of the press. But what is happening now is a different scenario. It's different. I'll tell you why it is different. As far as I know, it's the first time police officers have raided the media as has happened in the last few months. You had TV6 and you have had Newsday. And the government has to understand that it cannot be taken in isolation of the other trampling of fundamental rights that the government has been involved in.
But the government maintains, Mr. Maharaj, that this is typical of the independence. Whether the police are right or wrong, the government is not interfering in that process. It might be alarmed by it, but it's not interfering with the process.
No, but that's the wrong concept of government under our Constitution. They cannot direct the police what to do or who to investigate. But if they do something that is wrong, the police officers can be brought to justice. And if it is that you allow police officers to continue to violate the law and you do not do anything to them, in other countries that I know of where police officers violate the law and they do not follow guidelines and they misbehave in public office, they can be made to pay civilly or they can be made to pay criminally. But you see, the government has to set the example. This government, one has to be very objective about this. Forgive me for mentioning your case. You did an interview to a government minister. You were removed from that institution, government institution. Then the minister became head of communication. Now, I don't want to talk about all the things with the media, with this government. But the government has to send a signal that it is not part and parcel of violating fundamental rights. And I come back to this point. That the behavior of the government in creating that state of emergency and giving the police the license to search, to arrest, because even journalists were affected in that operation, send a signal a wrong signal to the police service. So if the government does not set the example and the values, the police would not feel constrained to follow law. And therefore, it's a failure of governance as to what is happening, not a failure of the police. For example, I saw the Minister of National Security on television the other day telling the opposition, it is for the Commissioner of Police to account, and I am not answering that question. That is wrong. The Commissioner of Police is the accounting officer for financial purposes, but the Minister of National Security is answerable to the Parliament and to the people for the misdeeds of the police service.
Is it that some of our government ministers do not understand their full role, their full responsibilities?
Well, the Prime Minister is a lawyer, senior counsel. The Attorney General is senior counsel too. And they could have a seminar. They are employing big-time lawyers, paying them huge fees. You have junior lawyers getting a lot of money now to be working for the government, so they can have a law seminar and indicate to them what are the functions of a minister, how we operate. I am getting the impression, and I feel very aggrieved about it, I'm getting the impression that you elect a government, the government is merely for show, and your excuse is, I can't tell the police what to do.
Just hold that thought for a moment, Mr. Murad, because we have to go to a break as we come around to 6:48 in Trinidad and Tobago. We'll take a quick break and come right back. We have a few more minutes left with the former Attorney General giving us some context to this entire situation of governance in the wider context and the relationship with the media in the more specific context when we come back.